It started with a headache, just a dull throb behind her eyes. By midnight, Laura couldn't feel her left side. The ER doctor said it was stress. But I knew better. As a brain specialist, I've seen how the mind can silently attack the body, and how the right healing can reverse it overnight. This isn't just medicine. This is a miracle waiting to happen. The headache that wasn't just a headache. Laura Carter, a 58-year-old teacher from Chicago, blamed her migraines on long hours and fluorescent lights. But when her vision blurred mid-lecture, and her words tangled into gibberish, her students screamed. The ER dismissed it as a complex migraine. No scans, no urgency, just a pat on the back and a prescription. She collapsed in the parking lot. Her husband, Mark, caught her before she hit the pavement. "This isn't normal," he muttered, fingers dialing 911. But the second ambulance crew said the same thing, stress. Then came the twist. As they wheeled her in, a nurse, older with tired eyes, leaned down and whispered, "Ask for Dr. Shaw. He listens." The hospital buzzed with fluorescent lights and hushed voices as Mark carried Laura's limp hand through the crowded ER. Dr. Shaw wasn't on duty, just his name on a faded plaque near neurology. A junior doctor shrugged. "He's unconventional." Mark didn't care. Unconventional was what they needed. They found him in a dimly lit office, walls covered in scribbled diagrams of brains and chakras. No white coat, just a man in a wrinkled shirt, staring at a screen flickering with brain waves. He didn't turn when they entered. "Migraine?" he asked, as if he already knew. Laura's voice was slurred. "They said it's just stress." Dr. Shaw spun around. "Stress doesn't paralyze half your face." His fingers traced her wrist, not checking her pulse but feeling it. "Your body's screaming. You just forgot how to listen." Then he said the one thing no doctor had ever said. "This isn't just in your head. It's between your head and your heart." A nurse burst in, waving Laura's blood work. "Her cortisol's through the roof. But her scans are clean." Dr. Shaw cut her off. "Scans won't show this." He grabbed a marker and drew 2 circles on a napkin. One labeled mind, the other body, then slashed a line between them. "This bridge is broken. And if we don't fix it, the next symptom won't be a headache." He paused. "It'll be a stroke." Mark's stomach dropped. Laura's eyes widened. The room felt too small. Then Dr. Shaw did something even stranger. He placed Laura's hand over her own chest and whispered, "Breathe like you're forgiving yourself." For the first time in months, Laura's shoulders relaxed. Just a fraction. Just enough to make Mark's eyes sting. But outside, a monitor screeched. A flat line in the next room. Code blue. The chaos swallowed the moment. As Dr. Shaw rushed out, he tossed a crumpled note at Mark. "Find the girl at St. Mary's Chapel. She'll explain." The paper trembled in Mark's grip. Who was the girl? Why a chapel? And what the hell did forgiveness have to do with Laura's crumbling body? The door swung shut behind the doctor, leaving them drowning in questions. And Laura's headache? It was already fading. The note burned in Mark's pocket as he pushed Laura's wheelchair through the hospital gardens toward St. Mary's Chapel, a crumbling stone building hidden behind overgrown roses. The air smelled like rain and old hymns. Inside, the only light came from flickering candles, illuminating a girl in a faded yellow dress humming behind the altar. She couldn't have been older than 16, but her eyes were ancient. "You took too long," she said without looking up. Her fingers traced the pages of a leather-bound book filled with handwritten remedies. Mind-body healing scrawled across the cover in ink that looked decades old. Laura's breath hitched. "Do you know Dr. Shaw?" The girl laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Shaw sends me the broken ones." She snapped the book shut and finally met Laura's gaze. "Your body isn't sick. It's angry." Mark stiffened. "Angry? She didn't choose this." "You're right," the girl interrupted. "But 3 years ago, Laura buried her son and never cried. Not once." The chapel went silent. Laura's hands shook. Mark's jaw dropped. No one knew about their stillborn baby. No one. The girl pressed a dried flower into Laura's palm. "Grief stuck in your ribs like a knife. Now your brain's shutting down to make you feel it." She tapped Laura's forehead. "This isn't a disease. It's a message." A gust of wind blew out the candles. In the sudden dark, Laura gasped. Her left fingers, numb for weeks, twitched. Then the chapel doors banged open. A man in a black suit stood silhouetted against the storm. "You shouldn't be here," he growled. The girl's smile vanished. She shoved the book into Mark's hands. "Run!" Mark barely had time to grip the wheelchair handles before the man in black lunged forward, his polished shoes crunching on broken stained glass. Laura clutched the ancient book to her chest as Mark spun her toward a side door, the one the girl had pointed to with her eyes just seconds before. The wheelchair wheels caught on uneven stone, but adrenaline propelled them forward into a hidden courtyard overgrown with ivy. Rain slapped their faces as they stumbled into the alley behind the chapel, the man's shouts fading behind them. "You need to see this," Laura gasped, flipping open the book as they ducked behind a dumpster. The pages were filled with handwritten case studies, patients whose incurable illnesses vanished after confronting hidden grief, rage, or guilt. One entry made her blood run cold. Asterisk patient number 347, stroke-like symptoms caused by suppressed trauma. Healing began when she screamed the truth she'd buried for 12 years. Asterisk the date, 3 days before Laura's first headache. A shadow moved at the alley's entrance. Mark yanked Laura deeper into the darkness just as the man's phone buzzed with a voice they recognized. Dr. Shaw's. "The book is more dangerous than the girl. Burn it." Laura's pulse roared in her ears. Shaw sent them here, why betray them now? Unless he never expected them to find the book. Unless the girl wasn't supposed to give it to them. Then came the worst realization of all. The pages under Laura's fingers were warm, as if alive. And the ink on the next case, a man whose cancer reversed after forgiving his father, was still wet. The dumpster rattled. A hand grabbed Mark's ankle. Laura screamed as the book flipped its own pages to a fresh entry, and began writing their names in dripping crimson ink. The crimson letters curled across the page like blood in water. Mark and Laura Carter. Denial of grief became a prison. The body remembers what the mind refuses to see. Laura recoiled as the ink shimmered, reshaping into a sketch of their stillborn son's face. A drop of moisture hit the paper, her tear, and the book shuddered in her hands. The alley walls seemed to pulse around them as the man in black wrenched Mark's leg harder, his other hand clawing for the book. Laura kicked wildly, her shoe connecting with his wrist. Crack. A snarl. The book's pages suddenly exploded outward like wings, slapping the man's face with a sound like thunder. He howled, clutching his eyes where the ink had seared into his skin like acid. Mark didn't wait. He hauled Laura up, wheelchair abandoned, and they ran, past overflowing gutters, past a homeless man who crossed himself at the sight of the living book glowing in Laura's arms. They burst onto a neon-lit street where taxis swerved, horns blaring. Laura's numb leg gave out. She collapsed against a bus stop bench, the book splayed open on her lap. The wet ink now spelled a single word. Breathe. Mark gripped her shoulders as she sucked in air, and for the first time since the chapel, she felt it. The crushing weight behind her ribs. The scream stuck in her throat since the day they'd buried their baby in a too-small casket. The book's pages rustled without wind, flipping to a new entry. Patient number 348, healing requires surrender. Scream now. A subway train roared beneath their feet. The man in black limped into the streetlight's glow. His burnt face twisted. Laura's hands trembled. Then she threw her head back and wailed. A sound so raw it shattered the bus stop glass. The book laughed in a voice that wasn't human. Across the street, Dr. Shaw stepped out of a black sedan, his eyes locked on the glowing pages. "You weren't supposed to wake it up," he whispered. The last thing Laura saw before the world went black was the book's spine splitting open like a mouth. The world came back in flashes. Cold metal against Laura's cheek. The stench of antiseptic, distant beeping that matched her erratic pulse. She tried to move but straps bit into her wrists. Hospital? No. The ceiling was too low, the air too thick with the smell of old paper and candle wax. Then she saw them. Rows of glass jars lining steel shelves, each containing a swirling black mist that pulsed like a heartbeat. The book lay open on a stainless steel table beside her, its pages now completely blank except for one sentence that kept rewriting itself in jagged letters. "Tell them what you saw in the chapel." A shadow loomed over her. Dr. Shaw's face was gaunt under flickering fluorescence, his lab coat smeared with that same crimson ink from the book. "You activated the record," he said, voice hollow. Now it wants your story. Behind him, the man in black, now bandaged, adjusted and 4 drip feeding into Laura's arm. The liquid was inky black. Mark's shout echoed from somewhere down the hall. "Laura, don't say a word. They're not doctors." A slap cut him off. Shaw pressed a scalpel to Laura's palm. "The girl in the chapel showed you something. The book reacted to it. What did you see?" His breath smelled like rotting pages. Laura's tongue felt heavy. The 4 liquid slithered through her veins, pulling memories to the surface like hooks. The chapel's stained glass. The girl's knowing smile. And then, the vision she'd buried even from herself. Their baby's tiny hand moving in the coffin as dirt rained down. The book's pages rippled. Ink erupted like a geyser, forming words midair. Asterisk patient number 348's blockage. Self-punishment for a sin that wasn't hers. Asterisk. Shaw staggered back as the ink morphed into a perfect DNA helix, then a screaming face, Laura's face, before splattering across the walls in a declaration. "The cure is in the wound." Alarms blared. The glass jars vibrated, their black mist slamming against the glass. Somewhere Mark was roaring her name. Laura's forebag burst. The black liquid wasn't medicine. It was ink from the book, and it was crawling up her arm toward her heart. Shaw whispered the last thing she expected. "I'm sorry." Then he plunged a syringe into her neck. Darkness swallowed her whole, but not before she heard the book whisper, "You'll thank us when you wake up." Laura's eyes snapped open, but she wasn't in the lab anymore. She stood in a white room with no doors, no windows, just endless blank space. The book floated before her, its pages now transparent, filled with shifting images of her life. The 4 ink had vanished from her arm, but she could still feel it inside her, slithering through her veins like a second bloodstream. Then the book spoke, not in words but in her own voice, echoing from a place deeper than memory. "You thought grief was your enemy, but it was the only thing keeping you alive." The pages flickered, showing the truth she'd refused to see. The night she lost her baby, the doctors had whispered coma, not gone. She'd been too traumatized to hear them. The funeral? A lie told to protect her from a harder truth. Her child was alive but taken, hidden by the same shadowy group that now controlled the book. Shaw wasn't the villain. He was a prisoner, forced to use the book's power to manipulate memories, to make people forget the experiments they'd witnessed. The ink inside her pulsed, burning with a new message. The cure isn't forgetting the pain. It's using it to fight back. Laura's hands clenched. For the first time in years, the numbness was gone. Every suppressed scream, every tear she'd swallowed, it all surged through her like lightning. The white room trembled. Cracks split the walls, revealing the lab beyond, where Shaw and the man in black were shouting over a monitor flashing, "Subject awakening." Then she was back. The straps holding her down snapped like thread. The ink wasn't controlling her anymore. She was controlling it. It coiled around her fingers, forming glowing symbols she somehow understood. Shaw's eyes widened. "You're not just a patient. You're the key." The book slammed shut midair and burst into flames, its ashes swirling into a single phrase that hung in the smoke. "The strongest healing begins when you stop running from the dark and turn to face it." The lab doors exploded inward. Mark stood there, gripping a fire axe, his face bloody but determined. Behind him, the girl from the chapel smiled. "Told you she'd figure it out." Laura reached for Mark's hand as the building shook. Somewhere a baby cried. Moral lesson: the things we fear most, grief, pain, trauma, aren't walls to break through but fuel to move forward. True healing doesn't come from forgetting or fighting the past, but from embracing its lessons and letting them make you stronger.